Hey, Jim.
Yep. Hey, how's it going?
Good. We're just waiting for a couple more members to come in and then we'll get started.
Back to time.
Right, thank you.
Good. I was ready to blame my new District 3 councilman for not fixing the Riverside Drive light. Like my wife used to call me every time she'd be stuck. You need to fix this light.
Well,
There was a wreck. So it's not.
oh, but that intersection, we decided is in the intersection is in District 3. It's not in District 6.
Oh, I'm District 6.
You're not in District 6.
So is
But we're
that
gonna-
intersection?
No,
like
well,
yours?
I've just made
I'm
that,
still gonna call
I've just made that executive decision. That intersection's right on the border. We're gonna put that in the, well, when it's green for you, it's in District 6.
Yes, no, that's right, that's right. But you could, Andy, on re-election, run on the campaign that I did, which was just gonna blow up the Johnson Ferry Bridge. So no East County.
Well, let me say one thing. When right when I came on council, the Braves, well, no, I'm sorry, shortly after, the Braves announced the situation going to the Battery, and everybody, particularly in your district, was up in
Oh,
arms.
got him.
And I was quoted at a council meeting saying, we are gonna build a wall around Sandy Springs and have Cobb County pay for it.
Oh, there you go.
And it was picked up in the newspaper. So,
Oh, that is funny.
what?
Was it in the official minutes? That's the question.
I think it was, it probably was, well, it was quoted on the Georgia game,
Hmm,
so it must have been official.
There you go.
All right, without further ado then, because I've made us run late, I'm sorry for keeping everybody, running a quick meeting. So I'm gonna call the meeting to order, the May 9th, 2024 meeting of the Sandy Springs Development Authority. Welcome, everyone. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Yes, good morning. As I call the roll, please confirm your attendance. Chip Collins,
Here.
Andy Bauman,
Here.
Tasha Battle, absent. Hardy Dorsey.
Here.
Joe Hausman,
Here.
Suni Park,
Here.
Ed Ukanu, absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you. The next item of business, but before I get into that, I want to officially welcome our newest member, Councilman Andy Bauman. John Paulson got appointed to some other, what did he get appointed to? Carolyn?
The Perimeter Community Improvement.
That's exactly right, the PCID. And, but we're happy to have Andy. I have known Andy all the way back to when we were opposing coaches in 8-year-old baseball a million years ago. And then he coached one of my
I was
sons.
gonna say, we were coaching.
Yeah, but first we were opposing coaches and we really, but became friends over that. And then over the years, Andy brought me one of my first big things. When I was on the city council, he had this great idea to start the farmer's market. And I could not understand what a guy from New York City was doing, starting a farmer's market, but he had a dream and a vision. And I got the good press for it, even though I didn't have to do anything.
You weren't even on, because you were running.
No, I was on it when we finally did it. It was one of the
Yeah,
first
yes,
things. Yeah.
but you actually wrote an article, you wrote an op-ed, and we were coaching at NYO about building community in the Target Center. And that was a piece of the inspiration. A lot of things came together, but you were running and I absolutely went to you first.
I'll take any credit I get.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
that's what being held in public office is taking credit for the work of others. Right. But Andy is a great guy. We're lucky to have him. The founder of the Sandy Springs Farmers Market. And then when I was rolling off, Andy called me and talked about maybe being interested in running for city council. And I said, well, I can either talk you into or out of it. Which one do you want? So I talked him into it and what, 12 years later?
Yeah, and then what did you do when I was like, said, oh, I'm looking forward to serving with you if I can win, and
I found better things to do. But anyway, Andy is awesome. Everybody's gonna really enjoy working with him and we're happy to have him. Thank you. So with that, let's move on to item 3. Do I have a motion for approval of the meeting agenda?
I'll second.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Park, seconded by Mr. Dorsey to approve the meeting agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that motion passes. The agenda is approved. The next item on the agenda is approval of the meeting minutes from January 11, 2024. Do I have a motion there?
Motion to approve the meeting minutes from January 11.
Second.
I'll second.
Okay, I've got a motion for approval of the meetings from Mr. Houseman, seconded by Mr. Dorsey. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that motion passes. The meeting minutes from January 11th are approved. The next order of business and the first order of new business is the election of a Development Authority Vice Chair. I will tell you that ever since I've been the chair, the vice chair has always been held by the appointed city council representative on the authority, which is now Andy Bauman, but it's the authority's decision. So do I have a nomination for vice chair?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would like to nominate Andy Bauman for Vice Chairman of the Development Authority.
Okay, do I have any other nominations? All right, Andy Bauman has been nominated. Do I have a motion with respect to Councilman Bauman being the vice chair?
Move that motion.
Second.
We have a motion to elect, or maybe do we do that by motion or a vote? Dan, or does it matter?
You only have one vote, you can do it by acclamation. You only have one candidate, you can do it by acclamation.
All right, so we've got a motion that Andy Bauman be the vice chair. We've got a second. The motion was made by Mr. Houseman. Is that right? Made the motion. Mr. Dorsey made the motion. Mr. Houseman seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, Andy, you hold the prestigious position of vice chair. In case, like Miss America, I'm unable to fulfill my duties, you shall step in. Let's see, the next order of business is discussion of proposed guidelines and application for new projects.
Lost Caroline.
Yeah, we did.
Oh, this is Caroline's presentation.
I thought she was presenting it.
I'm sure she is.
Yeah, she'll be right back. She had to run out for just a second.
Okay, can I skip over to the next item, Dan?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then we will table the discussion of proposed guidelines, move on to the next item of business, which is an estoppel certificate for the proposed subtenant of the Sandy Springs Gateway Owner LLC project. Is Caroline presenting this one as well?
I believe Jim.
Oh, Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Yeah.
Good. So yeah, the subtenant for the Sandy Springs Gateway project, this is a commercial portion of that project, which is now the tenant is SSP Chastain LLC. But they have a large subtenant, national chain that's looking to move in. And part of their due diligence before they sign a lease is that they want to make sure all the real estate is intact and there's no issues. And so I really haven't seen this before, but they've asked for the Development Authority as the owner of that project, subject to that tax incentive, to sign an estoppel certificate, basically stating that the tax incentive documents are still in place, no defaults, and that the bondholder for the tax incentive is still SSP Chastain. These are all factually correct statements. They asked us to do a few more things that Dan and I negotiated away from. So really just limited just to statements that the tax incentive is still in place for another 2 years, and that there's no issues on that one. So I'm comfortable with this estoppel certificate. And again, this would be for the subtenant. Right now, the subtenant has asked to be remained confidential, but it's a substantial chain, and I think it'd be good for the project. But if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Do we does the city know the identity of the?
AJC knows.
Oh, it's our-
Yeah, but they started off with a confidentiality agreement for us, and I explained that we're government entities, and by voting to approve this, it automatically makes it non-confidential. And so they still held that they wanted to keep it confidential, but it's I think if you read the AJC or just do a Google search, you'll find out who it is.
Okay. Apparently it's the worst kept secret in Sandy Springs. So,
And Mr. Chairman, could I add something to this, just for the edification of the group? And, I've been practicing law a long time, so when what's on the ground is not reflected what's somebody's trying to put into paper, especially with lawyers, I think you and the vice chair can appreciate this. All this was going on, and as Jim said, I agree with him, I've never seen it before. And when something new comes up, your antenna go up. And that part looks to me like this crowd, the new subtenant must have got knocked down by a bully development authority somewhere in the country. And they were overprotecting themselves. But while this was going on back and forth, you can't imagine the emails, they were actually building the front of that building to fit what the subtenant wanted.
really, yeah.
Yeah, spending thousands of dollars to retrofit the building for that subtenant and dealing with us as if the world depended on these documents getting done. And I can't get past sometimes my practical rearing in that the two just don't make any sense. But it looks like a la AJC that everything's set, and Jim's good help. This document is matches our abatement agreement with the owner.
Okay. And for the, I don't know, maybe I'm the only one that was on, but just so everybody understands, I'm sure Andy knows about it because it's in his district, but this was I think the first project that came up when I became the chair some time ago. And it's probably to date the biggest project we've approved, but it's what do they call it? It's not the Gateway anymore. What do they call it? Chastain Market?
Chastain Market. Yeah.
Chastain Market, but it's, are y'all familiar with which it's on Roswell Road inside the perimeter? It did have, what was in the space we're talking about? It's a Sprouts. So this is about a tenant going in the old Sprouts deal, but so the recommendation, Jim, is that we approve this, and the city likes this project. Is that?
Yes, correct. Approve the estoppel certificate. And the subtenant under our lease agreement with SSP Chastain, they don't have to get our approval for the subtenant, so they can sign a sublease with them without coming to us. But this is something unique, so I think it's appropriate for us to approve it. But this is an estoppel certificate and authorize the execution by the chairman.
Okay, are we able to take any public comment on this, or open it up for public comment?
Sure, it's publicly.
Does Madam Public wish to make any
I
comment?
don't have any comment other than knowing who the secret tenant is. It's a great addition, and I think folks in the area are thrilled. I know that pretty much it's out there, so folks have heard about it are very excited.
Yeah, I mean, dancing around the issue, I mean, the only question is the linkage of this conversation about an estoppel to the tenant. We do know that, I may say that Trader Joe's has actually itself announced in the last few days that it is going into the former Sprouts space. So if one wants.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been in every retail
Well,
publication.
but they themselves announced it.
Okay, good. Yeah.
And Jim, this is just stating the facts as they exist with respect to this.
Right, that's right. That the lease agreement is still in place and hasn't been terminated. And there's
Years are left on the tax abatement deal for this one. 2 more years.
years left.
Okay. All right. Well, then I need a motion with respect to this estoppel certificate. Does anybody want to move for approval? Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, got a motion from Mr. Park for approval of the estoppel certificate, seconded by Mr. Hausman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that motion passes. We can circle back now, Caroline, to a discussion of proposed guidelines and application form for new projects.
Yes, and thank you for your patience. So this is something I think I at least alluded to in the last meeting in January. But as interest rates have risen, redevelopment interest has peaked in different areas of the city. There have been many more inquiries on development authority assistance. And so we've had an informal process for guiding applicants through to get from first conversation to when they would get to the development authority. But we really wanted to standardize that process. One of the reasons is that some applicants have had not always positive experiences with the processes of other development authorities. And so they really want to know what's coming, what is expected of them as an applicant. So this is as much for staff and the development authority as it is for the applicant. So you can see the proposed application, which is the first 3 pages of this document, of the packet that is in front of you. Intake information, current site details, proposed project details, description of the project, and description of requested support. This and the following 3 pages, which run through the guidelines and what to expect. All of this indicates that nothing's really changing here. It's just kind of putting things on paper of, what is the benefit to the community? Where are they proposing to redevelopment? What are they asking for? So typically we always do 10-year abatement, 50% in year 1, it goes up 5% a year. Our projects in the past, we've required a portion of those savings to be paid back to the city for certain infrastructure improvement projects. So going back to Gateway Chastain or Chastain Market as it's known today, that Windsor Parkway realignment, the applicant paid fees, a portion of their savings back to the city to help with that project. So these guidelines make room for that to happen in the future. Should there be anything in proximity to the project that might warrant infrastructure improvements, they could essentially pay back a portion of their savings to help with that endeavor. Dan, am I missing anything?
No, I would add that these guidelines, if you meet these guidelines, then you get this incentive. That in no way limits the development authority in offering other incentives outside of this, if in fact the facts differ from this. It's just, as Caroline said, a guideline for those who wonder if they qualify for an incentive. But if, as an example, and you know this, what I'm telling you, these incentives, let's say they're the threshold for them is 100 jobs. Somebody shows up with 400 jobs, then their incentive could be, should be greater than what this guideline would set out, and you have that ability. These guidelines that staff has put together are just to give some notice to the general public that this is kind of a threshold to get an incentive.
And we're under no obligation to give it. We always have the discretion to
Absolutely.
Mhm.
give them up or down.
With the caveat that the general law is similarly situated persons must be treated in a like manner.
Yeah. Okay, does anybody have any questions? Caroline, do we need to take action on this? Do we need to move to approve the forms, or? I wouldn't think so. I mean, it's just an administrative.
It is, and then the actual approval of would come back to this body for a vote. If somebody fills out the form, it comes back.
Right, yeah. Okay.
So there,
Caroline, you want to, it wasn't on the agenda, but it lends itself to this. You want to ask this body about this dilemma we have about the jobs incentive and how it's being impacted by the stay-at-home folks, to kind of get an opinion from the front line here about if that should affect existing incentives or if we should apply it to ongoing incentives. Because I'm a little hesitant about going out in the real world and enforcing some of these clawbacks when the clawback is against kind of a modern move in employment. And I always like to hear from the policymakers about what you think about that. And what we're saying is that Caroline has a list of both 3 or 4 that can't sign the affidavit that they've met the employment numbers that got them the incentive, which might subject them to a clawback. But the reason they can't make it is because, like some of the world, some of their employees are at home. And so the question to me, policymakers, is what effect, if any, does that have on these existing incentives, and what, if anything, should it do or have an effect on this formula going forward?
And for clarification, the incentive policy that he's referencing is one that was adopted by council. So the implications of that are not something that you will need to consider or vote on in this body. But to Dan's point, we have our economic development incentive program. The basic criteria thresholds are X number of new jobs created, X number of capital investment, a certain lease commitment to the property in question. And there have been.
That's on the economic development.
Yes, so just kind of giving some color to what he brought up. But in the ever-changing world, what we have seen is that many positions that we assumed would be full-time in-office positions have become hybrid or remote. So how do we treat those agreements that were established before COVID? That's kind of the conversation that we're having. And so when we're looking at job creation thresholds, there might be some criteria that you all want to add to the application of, you know, we will only approve for companies that are hiring minimum hybrid and they're in the office at least 3 days a week. You all have the right to have that conversation and impose those limits if you so choose.
But so this is, so the relevance to here clearly would be for looking forward perspective incentives that might have some tie to job creation, in-office job creation. I mean, I think I'm trying to hear what both of you are saying, that that yes, the council will have to wrestle with clawbacks. There's not a clawback on the development authority pending that potentially.
No, my point was.
But looking prospectively, when we're thinking about job creation as an element of the of an incentive that this body wants to offer, understand that the world of job creation, in office, local job creation is different than it was 4 years ago.
What I meant was, I left this part out, and you may know better about this than me. I suspect the council, in deciding if they want to affect the policy, would like to know what the development authority thinks about it. That's what I'm. Just to get.
I'd like to know what this esteemed body thinks. Your philosophy that, you know, you get as many to input into it as you can.
Well, let's have a discussion on that. And I would start it off by saying, when the city's trying to incentivize job creation, what is the city's interest? Is it in making people want to move to Sandy Springs to fill that job? Is it wanting to get people in Sandy Springs that don't have jobs a job? Is it to generate economic activity that helps the tax base? You know, so I guess the first question I would ask of City Council and Dan and staff is, when we talk about job creation, what is it about? Is it just the greater good, or is it something Sandy Springs specific that we think helps the bottom line for Sandy Springs? And so I think first we need to know what's the goal? What are we trying to achieve when we talk about job creation?
Caroline studied this and knows about it.
All of the above. So it's bringing employees into the city who are going to contribute to the local business economy on the business growth side of things. We want those people to run errands here, shop here, eat here, buy homes here, and generally contribute to the local tax base and be positive members of society. So that is the goal. It's growth. It's tax revenue, circulating dollars in the community. So when people are hybrid and the job may be based here, that they may be working in some outer ring of, or living in some outer ring of Metro Atlanta, we're not receiving any of those fringe tax benefits from, they're not present here, they're not spending here. And so it might be that if employees are only here 60% of the time, maybe it's only 60% of the pre-COVID benefit. If they're fully remote and they live in a different state entirely at this point, that there's really not a local benefit.
Anybody have any thoughts?
I wonder if you shouldn't limit it to, if you allow the incentive to go on, either 100% or a portion, as Caroline just mentioned, we couldn't do it, but an employer can know what the address of the employee is and where their home office, where is located. So, and back to Caroline's theory, if being in the jurisdiction provides those economic benefits, then maybe it fulfills that requirement. But I wonder if there ought not be some alteration to it, especially as we go
But Dan,
out.
aren't these typically tied to physical space? Most of economic development is going to be tied to physical space that's being increased, acquired, developed, incrementally increased within the jurisdiction. And as it relates to office type jobs, most jobs, that space is generally going to correlate to their needs for physical space. Now that's different from somebody that was in a pre-COVID world and but prospectively, I think we're going to find that that's going to be pre-selected when it gets to us. That there's going to be a company that's coming to us, and it's going to be largely tied to their physical presence, and that physical presence is going to ordinarily be dictated by the warm bodies that are in fact in that office. You're unlikely to have somebody come ask, to do an 80,000 square foot presence, expecting only 10,000 feet of it is going to be used because their workforce is remote. I think in practicality, in the current world looking forward, there will remain a correlation. Now, to the extent those abatements and incentives or whatever it is something unrelated to physical expenditures, capital expenditures, then I think that's a different question. But I suspect most of there will be a correlation between the physical and the actual.
Well, from the presentation we received at council the other night, it struck me that maybe there ought to be two avenues. One is the policymakers, with good advice, deciding if we affect the existing incentives for those that are having employees that can't meet their threshold. But because of the impact to office space, that we may look at increasing the incentive if you in fact have physical occupation of a building, just to protect the tax digest of the city for those office spaces.
I think I hear you saying incentivizing, and I may have read that in either the Georgia Tech report that was circulated or something in the papers for here. I've done a lot of reading the last couple of weeks about economic development. But incentivizing the UPSs of the world that are saying, hey, look, we're going to really do a return to choose to do what they want to do. But there is incentive for the city, therefore this body, to favor, well, we use the word favor, but to, there's incentive for us to have businesses that are in office or whatever, but we want to fill that space with productive folks. Hybrid businesses may be great, but we do want to see people that are, return to work, because that return to work, as Caroline says, creates the circulating dollars at lunch.
And the office real estate.
The office real estate market, which is clearly facing some very severe headwinds.
It may be an opportunity to develop, articulate, create some, I don't know how to, we gotta be careful, but jobs for benefiting the city revenue is important. We don't want just job number wise. We down in the Savannah, Georgia Post Authority, Georgia spent millions of dollars for job creation, and they ended up, a lot of South Carolinians, the taxpayers.
Driving across every day.
Right, cross the river and then come and take a job. And we don't want to invest more city budget to provide East Cobb residents.
Driving across Kurt's Ferry Road and Riverside.
That's
Valley.
right, making me late for my meeting.
So it may be an idea, if put some sentiment that we are investing for Sandy Spring jobs. The jobs with the Sandy Spring revenue,
Build the offices.
maybe an opportunity to create that.
I don't think it would be benefit to, like you were saying, harm a company, but the incentive is the key, I think.
Well, I think the message you're getting is that this group, Dan, Caroline, staff, everybody, seems to support the notion of the incentives are tied to jobs, but the tying of the jobs are tied to the warm bodies that come into our city and spend money, or provide a job for people that live in our city. So it sounds like we agree that taking into account the type of work, hybrid, in office versus remote, is something that should be considered, and that we would support incentivizing companies to have their employees come into work, Sandy Springs companies. So I give you some direction and answers, and but along those lines, Caroline, when I heard you talk about an affidavit with regard to the economic development program, do we, for the things that we approve, which are tied to job creation, I mean, that's our mandate, do we require companies to report to us on whether they actually did create jobs and how many, et cetera? I mean,
We haven't previously. I don't believe, and Jan and Jim may know better than I don't believe an annual reporting is part of the agreement that gets executed. It may be a clause that we can include in the future, which is how we do it for the economic development incentive program, so that we can ask those questions. And it would be tied back to the information that they put in here.
Caroline's right, they make a certification. And she's having a little trouble with it now. People don't want to sign it because we still have 106 jobs, but 31 of them are at home, whatever the number is.
Yeah.
And that's the part that I'm a little uneasy about, going back to, representing the city and going back out into the world that now has a standard that's different than the one we're about to enforce. I just think policymakers need to know.
well, and I appreciate y'all raising that question, because while this group does have a fairly narrow thing we can do, which is facilitate tax incentive deals, you still have a lot of people that are out there in the community, and great people on this board that have a lot of good ideas and want to be doers. And I think we welcome as a board the opportunity to provide input and support wherever we can, whether it's a specific project or just general sentiments. So thanks for bringing that to us. With that, I think we can move on unless anybody has any questions about the guidelines and the application form. All right, so we've got, and maybe that was under the heading of other business, but is there any other business to discuss? Caroline, I would ask that you provide us a report of things that are percolating out there in the community that might come before the board, if you're comfortable doing so. Yeah, and you can say it in general, you can talk about it in general terms, if there's anything to report, but maybe there's not.
There are generally some potential redevelopment projects that may come before the board now that these forms have been blessed to be put out there, but I don't feel comfortable making.
No, that's fine, and that is fine, but I wanted the board to know that there are some things that have been in play out there, and I think that it's likely that this board would, or it's possible at least, that this board gets presented with a potential deal to review at some point this year. Any other business anybody wants to bring up? Bring to the.
I just want to say, glad to be here.
Great.
Look forward to working with all of you from across the city. And, I've got a background in law, and in real estate, including adaptive reuse, multifamily, some single family, apartments, a retail investor. So I've got a broad exposure both, as a attorney and also as a investor, in real estate and, in the business community. And I look forward to working with this board.
All right, with that, do I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Andy. You're going to be a great addition. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second. All right, we got a motion to adjourn, Mr. Hausman, second by Mr. Bauman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody. When's our next meeting scheduled for? July? Probably.